This episode is presented to you by NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. With NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can watch your favorite team's out-of-market Sunday games, plus watch up to 4 games at once with Multiview. Don't miss the race to the playoffs. NFL Sunday Ticket is now just $39 when bundled with YouTube TV, where you get even more football. Visit youtube.com/Spotify offer to sign up now. Lowest price on YouTube TV with base plan. Rest of 2023 season. Terms and embargoes apply. No cancellations.
'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
Looking for a fun way to win 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/play100 and use code PLAY100. That's code PLAY100 at prizepicks.com/play100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello and welcome back to the Paddock and the Pavilion with me, your host, Stephen Wallace, for the second part of our podcast with cricket writer Mike Thompson, who has just written The Last Corinthian about the cricketing life of MJK Smith. After covering his early cricket career in part 1, today's episode covers MJK Smith's Test career, which began in 1958. Capture more cricketing nostalgia as Mike reveals some fascinating stories about MJK's Test career, especially his successful times touring as the England captain in India, South Africa and Australia. MJK captained England in 25 of his 50 Test matches. Find out the respect held for Mike by both teammates and opponents in this relaxing look back at cricket during the 1950s, 60s and 70s. Welcome back, Mike, for part 2 of MJK Smith, The Last Corinthian. Mike made his Test debut at Edgbaston in 1958 against New Zealand, and he opened the batting.
He didn't do very well, actually. He was out for single-figure scores in both innings, I think. They persisted with him, though, and he got a second chance. I think he made, in the second Test, he made a 50, I think. And he played in the third Test and didn't do very well, and then was dropped by England for some time. He didn't. It wasn't until his incredible year in 1959 when he got over 3,000 runs in the season. 3,245, in fact. The first person who'd got more than 3,000 for 10 years. The last person was Len Hutton in 1949. He couldn't be kept out of the side any longer, the England side any longer after that phenomenal year. But his debut was in 58, but he wasn't a highly successful debut. And in fact, John Arlott, I think it was John Arlott, said, one of his innings, he said, was really joyless. He said he didn't look like the same player who'd scored all those runs at Oxford.
But for a bit of context and listeners, who was playing for England at the time in 58?
Well, it would have been people like Peter Richardson, I would imagine, Trevor Bailey, people like that. Bailey was tried as an opener on several occasions. Colin Cowdrey. Peter Richardson was the main opener, but they were trying to find somebody who could partner him, and they experimented with quite a few people. I think Mike had been asked to play as an opener, which didn't really suit him. But he said if the selectors ask you to do that, then you do it. Mike's normal position was number 4, and that was his preferred position. But he had opened quite a few times at Oxford. But the selectors asked him if he would open, and it didn't really work out well for him in 58.
What type of player was Mike? I know he favoured the leg side.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. I think you could say that again. According to Demis Amis, that's what he'll be remembered for. The person who invented the lap shot, to take a ball from anywhere off the stumps or outside the off stump and play it into gaps on the leg side. I mean, John Jameson told me a story about Mike when they were playing Lancashire, and I think it was David Hughes was bowling for Lancashire, who was, I think, a left arm spinner, and he was quite young, David was, and I think it might have been his debut or very early on in his career, and he the first ball he bowled to Mike in the over was pitched outside off stump and spun away further to the off. Mike went across and hit it for 4. David Hughes bowled the next one a bit wider. Mike did the same thing and hit it to a different position on the leg side, again for 4. And he did that for the first 5 balls of the over. He hit the first 5, and David Hughes was pitching them wider and wider each time. But Mike still managed to get them over onto the leg side for boundaries. And in the end, in exasperation, he turned, I think David Lloyd was the Lancashire captain that day. He turned to David Lloyd and he said, where do I bowl at him? And David Lloyd said, why don't you try a straight one? And he bowled a straight one. John Jameson said he bowled him a straight one and Mike blocked it. Yeah, but Boycott said to me, Jeff Boycott sent me an email last week, actually. I suppose I wasn't fishing for compliments, but I'd sent him a copy of the book to thank him for his contribution to it. And I sent him an email asking him if he'd read the book and what he thought of it. And he sent me a very complimentary email back saying he'd really enjoyed it, particularly the first 2/3 for some reason. He didn't elaborate on why, but he said, Mike, you said you've done Mike proud. He said he's a top bloke. He said one of the best captains I've ever played for. He said, when I first saw him play, he said I was amazed at how he managed to get balls from the offside to the leg side, how he managed to do it. He said I was just amazed by that. He also told me an interesting story about Mike. He said, when I was about 16, he said, at school, he said, I realised my eyesight was going. He said, I couldn't see what the teacher was writing on the blackboard. And he said, so at the suggestion of my uncle Algy, he spelt his name out for me, Algigy, he said, Albert Spate, he said he were a good fast bowler in club cricket. He said, couldn't bat for toffee, but he said, he suggested I write to Mike, who played in Glasses, and he said I did write to Mike. He said, and I got a very nice letter back from him a couple of weeks later, a few days later, saying it's fine to play in Glasses, but you need to make sure you have shatterproof lenses. And he said I did that, and he said I played in Glasses right until 1968 when I went over to contact lenses. But Mike always played in. Mike never went over to contact lenses. When he got a test recall in 1972, quite unexpectedly. But he said I was thinking about changing to contact lenses then, but I decided against it. I'd played in Glasses all the while, and I didn't really want to risk changing. And he played against the touring Australians in 3 tests in 1972 after having played his last test for England previously in 65, I think, against the 66. It would have been against the touring West Indies when they got beaten by an innings in the first test and he got dropped as captain.
Let's hear what Dennis Amiss thought of Mike as a player. What were Mike's qualities as a player?
He was a top batter, 180. I well remember. I mean, he played lots of fantastic innings, and his 180. I think it was at Stroud on a Turner against Gloucester. Mortimer Allen, Sam Cooke was just unbelievable. He was just a great player of spin bowling, and could play under any pressures, any circumstances. Like that time at Stroud when we were going to lose the match because it was turning square. So a top player.
Did you learn a lot from him batting with him?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I tried some of the things that he did, and once Fred Titmus was bowling at Lord's, and he kept turning it off the face of the bat round for one just to keep the score moving. I thought, well, I'll try that, and I got a leading edge, caught and bowled Titmus. So some of the things that he did that I tried to copy him didn't work. They worked for him though, but he was much better at doing that.
MJK first went on tour for England to the West Indies in 1959-60. He then served as the England vice-captain on their tour of India, Pakistan and Ceylon in 1961-62. So, Mike, when did Mike first captain England?
He captained a side to East Africa in 63, end of 63, but his first real captaincy of a test side was at the beginning of 64, when he took a side to India for an 8-week tour in January and February 1964.
That must have been a challenging place to go to in those days.
It was very challenging, according to Mike. He said the food hygiene was very poor. He said the main problem was trying to get 11 fit players to turn out. And he said on one particular occasion, we had 3 players in Beach Candy Hospital in Bombay then, Edrich and a couple of others. They were all suffering from dysentery, I think, food poisoning. And Mickey Stewart fell ill as well. Mickey Stewart offered to play even when he shouldn't have done, because at the time they were so short. They were talking about putting Henry Blofeld in the team. And Mickey Stewart said, I'm not well. He said, but 25% of me is better than 100% of Henry, so I'll play. But it didn't work out very well because on the first day when they were fielding, Mickey Stewart told me, he said, I dived for a catch. He said, landed on my stomach, didn't get the catch and brought up my lunch. So he said, that finished me for the game. So he then finished up joining the others in hospital. So they had 4 men in hospital in the end, 4 of the players. And, he had to fly home. Mickey Stewart, he was so ill. Once he had to spend some time recovering there first, and he flew home. And they flew out Cowdrey and Parfitt. Barrington had also broken a finger or his wrist or something, and he had to return home as well. And they sent out Cowdrey and Parfitt to replace them. Both of them did pretty well, but it was a dull series.
All 5 of the Test matches against India in 1964 were drawn. But it was a time where players didn't always tour the subcontinent, didn't they?
Well, they went. The best players gave it a miss. To be honest, they didn't fancy it. It was a fairly weak side that went out there. I mean, some of the commentators thought it wasn't going to work very well with Dexter under Mike, especially when Dexter had captained Mike on the previous tour to India. And But it worked perfectly. In fact, Tom Cartwright said, we got a real surprise about what a nice chap Ted was. He said he asked me and John Mortimer if he could come to dinner with us on the first evening. He said, "Do you mind if I join you for dinner?" And he said he was a terrific team man, and Mike said that as well, and so has Peter Parfitt. Peter Parfitt's got a Edward Dexter, he calls him Edward Dexter. He's got a terrific regard for Dexter as Parfitt. But no, he's a good team man. I mean, everybody. Tom Cartwright said he wasn't a bit. He said he wasn't a bit posh. He said he was. We'd all thought he was going to be, but he was just one of the lads, and he was terrific.
Well, England won the series 1-0, and that led Mike to then take the England team to Australia the following winter, 1965-66.
It did, yeah. But just let me tell you a little anecdote about Mike. They won the first test in South Africa by an innings, mainly thanks to David Allen and Fred Titmus, who got, one of them got 5 wickets in the first innings. I think Allen got 5 wickets in the first innings. Titmus got 5 in the second. And the remaining 4 tests were drawn. In the second test, apparently Gubby Allen turned up to watch. And at one point, England were fielding and they weren't making much headway. And Gubby Allen sent out a message, the drinks interval, to Mike, "Why don't you change the bowling?" According to Bob Barber, Mike took a pen off the waiter and wrote on the message, "Why don't you get stuffed?" and sent it back to Gubby Allen. I've asked Mike about this. Mike says he can't remember, but I think he's been a bit coy about it, to be honest. But Bob Barber said he's prepared to swear under oath that happened. So, because Gubby liked to manage things even when he wasn't a player, he liked to have his say.
But it's so next winter they did go to Australia and
had
a successful tour.
They went to Australia and they again won. I think they won the either the second or third test by an innings, and then they lost the third. I think it was in Adelaide. No, the fourth. They won the third test by an innings and lost the fourth in Adelaide by an innings to Australia, and the last test was drawn. So it was a 1-1 series. Mike was furious about that because he felt that they deserved to win the series. They played better. They should have won the second test as well, I think.
And Mike was even a popular captain with the Australians in Australia.
Oh, yeah. Mike was popular with everybody. I mean, David Frith said to me that he said about Mike, he said to have never made any enemies in a divisive game like cricket is quite an achievement because it is a divisive game. I mean, and you get a lot of rivalries, a lot of players falling out with each other. Mike never had an enemy. He was.
He comes back then from Australia 1-1. We'd be pleased with a 1-1 series now down under.
We would,
and yet, one home test later, he was dropped from the side. You mentioned we lost to the West Indies by an innings in the first test of 1966. That must have hit Mike hard when he was dropped as captain and as a player.
Well, it did hit him hard, I think, but Mike, being the sort of chap he is, he's very philosophical. And I said, weren't you bitter about only getting, one game against them, being dropped after one game? And he said, a captain, it's all right being captain, but you've got to get runs. He said, and I had a bad game. And he didn't make any excuses. He didn't whinge about it. But he must have been disappointed. I know his players were more disappointed than he was. I mean, this is what John Edrich says in his autobiography, It Runs in the Family. Mike had been considered good enough to skipper a team that very nearly brought back the Ashes. He had been widely acclaimed for the enterprising cricket his team had produced, yet just this one test and a few months later he was thrown out. Surely he should have been given the captaincy for all 5 tests against the West Indies. That is the way to breed confidence. How can a skipper feel completely in command when everyone knows he's only been appointed for part of a series? And he says, he goes on to say, the paradox of it all was that Mike was liked and respected by his players. That is why the tour of Australia under him was such a happy one. He knew the game inside out, and he set a great example by his close catching. If there was any fun off the field, he was in the middle of it. He possessed this casual, unflappable way. He didn't mope if he made a low score. He would just flop down on the dressing room bench seat, remove his boots, put on his sandals, and exclaim with a grin, "That wasn't very good, was it?" and then forget all about it. He accepted that his players knew something of the game. If you didn't get runs, he knew you felt bad enough about it without any strictures from him. Some skippers will order extra practice and lay down the law if the game goes wrong, but not Mike. He treated every day as a new day, every match as a fresh challenge. He had no time for recriminations, but he would certainly speak his mind if he thought anyone wasn't pulling his weight. Mike's a perfect gentleman. He's very mild-mannered, he's very calm, but he's no shrinking violet. And he could be quite firm if required. I mean, I'll tell you another story about quickly. Fred Rumsey, when he first played for Mike, was opening the bowling against New Zealand. I think this would have been in '65. I think it was when South Africa came back and beat England 1-0. In England, and it was a 3-test series, and they then had a 3-test series against New Zealand, and Fred Rumsey was playing in that, and Mike said, and partnering Fred Truman, and Mike said to Fred at the start of the New Zealand innings, "Which end do you want?" And Fred Rumsey said, "Shouldn't you be asking Fred that? Shouldn't you be giving Fred the choice of ends?" You know, Fred was the senior bowler. And Mike said, "Are you the England captain?" Fred said, I was taken aback. He said, no, sorry, skipper. And he said, "Okay, so which end do you want?" And that's probably Mike's psychology, thinking, it would motivate Fred to be given the choice of ends. And He's been very helpful as well. Fred Rumsey, he's quite a character as well. He's got a few anecdotes up his sleeve.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. You could turn $10 into $250. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/fan and use code FAN. That's code FAN at prizepicks.com/fan.
Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Why?
If you
Why?
have T-Mobile 5G home internet, you might be hearing this
Why?
a lot.
Why?
Every time your internet slows down during the busiest hours.
Why?
Because your network gives priority to cell phone users.
Why?
Good question. Why not switch to Cox Internet with 2 times faster download speeds than T-Mobile 5G home internet during peak hours?
Okay.
Stop the whys and visit cox.com/5G home for details. T-Mobile prioritizes certain T-Mobile phone users over home internet users during times of congestion.
Well, Warwickshire won the Gillette Cup under Mike's leadership in 1966, but at the end of the 1967 season, he actually retired full-time cricket.
Yeah, that's right. I think he felt he'd got a growing family. It was time to do something else. He was approached by Derek Robbins, a self-made entrepreneur who was actually chairman of Coventry City Football Club, the man responsible for bringing Jimmy Hill to Coventry. He had a building firm. He'd started out, like a lot of famous entrepreneurs, with a cement mixer in a field. And he became quite a successful entrepreneur. And he wanted Mike to work for him. He was building squash courts, which were in vogue at the time, and he wanted Mike to work for him as a salesman, really, but mainly for Mike's ambassadorial qualities because of who he was. And I mean, Mike isn't not really a salesman, but he worked for him for a couple of years. But at the end of it, I think Robbins wanted him to tour Australia again. He wanted him to become a test selector, and Mike didn't want to do that. He said, "I'd never get home." And in the end, Mike's not put it this way, but they fell out a bit, really. And Derek Robbins had his own cricket team as well, and he wanted Mike to play for him, a lot of the time. And anyway, they parted company at the end of 1969, it would have been. And then Mike went back to Alan Smith. Alan told me this, and he said, "Would you mind if I came back?" And Alan said, "No, not at all." He said, "I'd be delighted." And so he came back, and he played for Warwickshire again from 1970 to 1975, another 6 seasons.
And in 1972, they won the championship.
Yeah, they won the championship. They had won, as you say, they won the Gillette Cup in 66. They'd actually got to the final in 64. I think it was either the first or second year, and they got beaten in the final by Sussex, I think. Ian Thompson skittled them. The ball was swinging all over the place, apparently, and Mike opted to bat on a damp Lord's morning, and they were bowled out quite cheaply. And I think Sussex knocked them off for only 1 or 2 wickets. So they learnt the lesson from that batting first at Lord's is not always a good thing, according to John Jameson, who spent some time working at Lord's, and he said the ball can swing around quite alarmingly there early in the morning sometimes. Mike was absolutely fearless at short leg, even after he had his wrist broken playing against Yorkshire and missed about 6 matches because of it. But according to David Brown, he said, David told me, he said he took some amazing catches and he used to stand so close. The other thing about that is that...
no helmets, no shin guards.
No helmets, no. And I asked Mike about fielding there, and he said there were certain players who wouldn't field there for me. He said, if you don't fancy it, he said, you're never going to catch anything anyway. He said, you'll flinch and you won't catch anything. And he said also there were 1 or 2 players in the Warwickshire side who weren't too keen to field there, so I never asked them. He said, you've got to have the right physique and the right athleticism, as well as the right sort of guts to field there. And there are certain fielders who were very good close to the wicket. Parfitt was one of them, and Bob Barber was another. Bob Barber and Parfitt were very good close to the wicket fielders.
And Mike's one of a select few cricketers who've got more than 500 first-class catches.
Is he? Yeah. Mickey Stewart was a very good close to the wicket fielder as well. I think he must be well up there, if not ahead of Mike on that. Because he played for many seasons as well, Mickey did.
You mentioned earlier 1972 was Mike's final appearances for England against Australia. We played the first 3 tests, where he played against Dennis Lilly and Rodney Marsh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He also featured in Massey's match at Lord's when Bob Massey got 16 wickets.
He did. And in fact, I have a friend who saw that game and was actually at Lord's that day. And he said that Mike was the only batsman who actually showed any ability against Massey that day. He said he was in for about nearly 2 hours. He only got 30. but he was the only one who seemed to be able to play Massey. But I mean, Massey skittled them. But again, the ball was swinging around corners according to players, and it was quite exceptional because Massey never did a lot after that, before or after, and it was quite exceptional to get that many wickets.
And Mike finished with 50 tests, 25 of those as captain, 2,278 runs at an average of 31. How would you and how did Mike sum up his test career?
I think, to be fair, you can't class Mike as a top-ranked test batsman with an average of that size. He was, to some extent, suspect against real pace. I mean, you could say that about a lot of batsmen, but he particularly was. Whether he doesn't think it was anything to do with his eyesight. He's adamant that it wasn't that. But there's no doubt that, real fast bowlers like Wes Hall, Fred Truman and Statham, they got him out on a lot of occasions early on. It's funny because Mike either seemed to get a good score or a low score. He never got sort of many in between. He had a couple of test centuries, I think, and he had several scores in the 90s. But he also had a number of scores under 10. He was definitely suspect early on to quick bowling. Why? I'm not sure. But I mean, if you look at his county record, his county batting average is about 39, I think.
More importantly, you've worked alongside Mike with this book. What did you find him like as a person?
Oh, I mean, he's an absolute gentleman. He's kind. He's generous. He's perfect manners. He's incredibly modest as a person. When I told him what Boycott had said about him, he said, "No, that's a bit over the top, isn't it?" He's an absolute prince as a person. I think everybody likes Mike. I mean, I'll tell you what. This is what Alan Smith says about him. He said, purely as a batsman and also as a close to the wicket fielder, he's earned the respect, admiration and gratitude of spectators around the world. But more importantly, wherever he has been, whomsoever he has met, he has instantly made friends. No player in the last 25 years has been more universally popular. Hard-bitten professionals have been prepared to walk over a cliff if he so decreed as captain. And that's true. I mean, Mike was universally liked, and he's very calm. He's a little bit eccentric. He's got. Alan Smith told me another anecdote about Mike, about his absent-mindedness. He said, we were sitting in this box one day. Warwickshire were batting. He said, and Mike was writing all these calculations down on a piece of paper, and he said we all thought he was trying to work out, when it was best for a declaration. He said, and then suddenly Mike said, "Do you realise?" He said, "it's cheaper to fly to Glasgow rather than go by train." Yeah.
Well, let's hear what Dennis Amos thought of Mike as a person.
He's a top guy. Everybody likes him. Very easy and relaxed, very relaxed person. Very easy to talk to, and there's always, got a good view on things. Really good company. We all liked him. It wasn't difficult to follow MJK. It was very easy to follow him, and he was a sort of self-motivator and of players, and we all liked him very much. Still comes to the matches now. Nearly's son brings him to games, and so does Barbara, his daughter, and he's still interested in the club. He loves the club, he would have been Mr. Cricket at Warwickshire at one stage, and probably to a lesser extent now he's a lot older. But, good man, good club man, and one easy to follow.
Hi, it's Stephen here. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our listeners from all around the world for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion during the past 12 months, and wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy and peaceful New Year. Please do keep listening. I would love to hear from you around the world, so please drop me a line. Let me know what you like about the show. The Paddock and the Pavilion is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network and is available on Apple Podcasts, Google and Spotify. Dennis also paid tribute to you, Mike, for
did he?
asking him to give his thoughts, opinions about Mike for the book. And on that subject, we're now going to hear from Dennis. And this is what he had to say.
Yeah, no, I was delighted to contribute something to Mike. That I played with him. I knew him. We didn't play in the same England side together, and didn't tour together. But I just it was just great to contribute to someone who's been Mr. Warwickshire and played a big part in my life as captain and as my chairman. Terrific chairman, really backed me on everything I did. So we were a good duo in those days, and we had a very successful time. And things went for us in that, especially in that 1994 season. It was just terrific, and I couldn't have asked for a better bloke to be chairman and support me as chief exec.
How much of a joy was it, though, Mike, for you to do the book about Mike?
Oh, it was terrific. I mean, not only the chance to have in-depth discussions with Mike, but also the chance to meet so many famous ex-cricketers as well. And I have to say, I was warmly received by all of them. There were one or two who didn't want to participate. I won't mention them because, they prefer to remain anonymous. But by and large, there was only two or three that didn't want to participate. But that is nothing to do with Mike. I don't think it was to do with other reasons. Either they'd become disaffected by cricket, or it was part of a history that they didn't want to, resuscitate. But no, I found it a real thrill to have, and I say I'm still in contact with some of these people. I was talking to Peter Parfitt only last week. I was talking to Jim Stewart this week. Jim's not been very well lately, actually. He had a fall. He had a fall a few weeks ago. He actually fell out of bed. And I said, how did you manage? He lost his wife about many years ago. Jim did, probably 20 years ago. But he lives on his own in Henley and Arden, not that far from Mike, and they see each other occasionally. But Jim was a very good rugby player in his day. He played for Coventry in the 1950s when Coventry was one of the best rugby teams in England. And he was very unlucky, actually, because he almost won a Welsh cap. Jim was born in Llanelli, and he almost won a Welsh cap. But for injury, he probably would have he got injured in the trial, I think, and he would have won a Welsh cap. And he was also 12th man for England at cricket. So he very nearly became a double international. And
like Mike.
Yeah, like Mike. Yeah, I mean, Mike is the only living double international. And I said, how did you manage to fall out of bed? He said, I was dreaming about scoring a try in rugby. I mean, this is a guy of 89, still dreaming about scoring. He said, I dived for the corner. And he said, I dived out of bed. And I really injured my hip and my side, and I cut my hand. I'm not sure how I did that, but I cut my hand. He said, but the worst of it was, he said the bloody referee disallowed the try. He said I'd got my foot in touch.
You'll have to tell Mike this story.
Yeah, he said when you tell Mike Smith that, he said he'll wet himself.
Mike, where can we get the book from? I've read it and I've really enjoyed the journey, good. Mike's cricketing journey.
Yeah, well, if you want a signed copy, a copy signed by Mike, if you email me on mike@speaklanguages.co.uk and send me your address, I can send you a copy through the post. mike@speaklanguages.co.uk.
I'll put that on the podcast bio. It's also available on Amazon and other bookshops.
It is. It's available at Amazon, but that wouldn't be a signed copy. In fact, the price of the book is £25, and that's the price for a signed copy. But you can probably get it on Amazon cheaper than that now. But it's selling pretty well. I mean, there were 1,000 copies produced, and I think at least 500 have sold already. And I've got quite a few more talks to give on it. I'm giving one to the London branch of the Cricket Society in January, and also one to the Wombwell Cricket Lovers Society, which is in Yorkshire near Barnsley. And I think that's one of the oldest cricket societies in the country, and they get a lot of good guest speakers there.
Well, I hope that goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being on the Paddock and the Pavilion. I'd like to wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. A belated 80th birthday wishes to you. Mm-hmm. And I hope they keep selling those books, and it won't be long before the cricket season will be starting again.
No, that's right. And I'm looking forward to that as well. Yeah, not as a player. I stopped playing 5 years ago when my legs wouldn't stand up to 3 hours fielding anymore.
That's always the problem at the end, fielding. And send my regards to Mike, and hopefully when I get the podcast edited, you'll be able to send him a copy of our chat.
That'd be great. He'd like that. Yeah, he'd like that. Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Yeah,
thank you.
I've enjoyed it.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.